When they built the chimney, they may have put a cracked tile in there. That does happen.
Oh, they wouldn't do that, Russ.
Yeah.
Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Chimney Sweep, a podcast devoted to helping you safely use your fireplace or heating system. I'm your host, Clay Lamb, and my friends, it really doesn't matter if you're brand new to having a fireplace because there's something always changing when it comes to heating your home with wood, gas, or electric. So join me as we gather in my virtual fireplace. We'll be chatting about hints and tips and how we can make some of those important chimney and fireplace repairs, possibly save some energy, and how we can cut back on those heating bills. I'm on the phone here with Russ Demick from Copperfield Chimney Supply. Russ, I got a question for you, buddy.
Okay.
Here it is. I had a customer call about a chimney fire. They're asking about some of the signs of a chimney fire. What do I tell them?
Well, there's several things to look at, Clay. One of the most prominent signs is when you look in the chimney that's had a chimney fire, you'll see some real, for lack of a better term, puffed up creosote. It looks like if you touch it, it's kind of crumbly, like the snakes we played with on the sidewalk when we were kids.
Oh, yes.
Real fragile, kind of tissue paper-like stuff. That's one of the signs there's definitely been a chimney fire. What that is it's fully pyrolyzed creosote, or it's puffed up and burned. Some other things you might look for. Chimneys in general get dirtier from the top to the bottom. And if you have a chimney that's dirty, and then there's a clean spot, and then there's a dirty spot, that's a sign there's probably been a chimney fire. There's really no reason that there would be a clean area in a chimney. They typically do get progressively dirtier from the bottom to the top. So that would be a sign you might have had a chimney fire there.
So it's kind of like scorch marks?
It might be scorch marks, or it might show the orange tile there.
Okay.
Where normally you wouldn't see that.
Okay.
But scorch marks can be there.
What are some other signs that you've seen that I want everybody to know from a manufacturer's, distributor's level? You've been around the country. You've known a lot of chimney fires. Now, I've been around it for a long time, but I think you've seen it from one end of the country to the other. So give me a couple other signs.
Okay. Some of the other things we'll see is a lot of folks now have top ceiling dampers.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter who manufactures those, but they typically are made out of cast aluminum. And aluminum has a fairly low melting point. So what happens is they can actually melt those dampers. It doesn't really matter who manufactures them. Probably 80-90% of them out there are cast aluminum. So you might see some damage there as far as melting, things like that. Another thing you'll commonly see, a lot of folks now have a stainless chimney cap up there, which stainless is definitely the way to go on chimney caps. But if you look at that cap, sometimes you'll see a kind of a rainbow effect, a multicolored effect. And that really is a sign that cap has been subjected to a high heat incident of some kind. Might have been a chimney fire, might not have been, but it's a sign that cap's been subjected to some pretty high heat.
Isn't there some kind of a fuse or something that melts on those lock top dampers or top setting Lamance dampers? Or isn't there a fuse that melts out?
Fusible link, they call it up there, and it's kind of a spring-loaded mechanism, kind of U-shaped. And what happens is that if there's a chimney fire, that fusible link will melt, and those springs will spring out, and you'll be unable to close the chimney damper.
Okay, so it melts down the link. It's kind of like a figure eight thing, if I remember. It melts down and opens it up, locks it open?
Correct. And the reason for that is if you had an extreme chimney fire, which is very, very rare, what happens is it sometimes will take the temper out of those springs, and the damper might go shut and then put the products of combustion back in the house. So that's what that's for, is just to keep that from happening.
Okay, so now we got light puffy creosote, kind of ash paper or styrofoamy look. And then you move into some kind of discolorations into flue tile, or even kind of like bleaching or back to the flue tile color where it was glazed. Right. You got melted fuse links or bluing on the top of
melted
the cap.
Fuse links, or even the damper in extreme cases can melt itself.
Actually, the metal damper down at the bottom.
Yeah, at the top. The bottom one, you might see some warping.
What is some of the issues that are going on with it? What triggers this?
Well, creosote basically is a byproduct of combustion. When you don't have complete combustion, you get creosote. Wet wood's a problem. Choking the stove down's a problem. But whatever the case may be, over time, this combustible creosote, what it is just combustible gases from burning that for some reason didn't burn. And they deposit inside the flue. And there's lots of reasons that, it's quite a long conversation, but you'll have creosote inside the flue.
We're going to come back to that conversation. I want to talk about that. Well, go ahead.
What happens is with a chimney fire, you actually will have combustion somewhere within the venting system. You're not expecting it. Inside the smoke chamber, in the thimble area on a wood stove, maybe in the connector pipe on a wood stove, or actually in the flue itself. Now, when you have a chimney fire, what happens is the temperature in that flue or the area of the fire jumps a lot. For example, you might have a flue temperature of, say, 400 or 500 degrees. When you have a chimney fire, what happens is you get an immediate temperature rise from that 400 to 500 degrees up to 2100 degrees. So if you have a ceramic lined chimney, tile liner, folks call them different things, flue tiles. What happens is when you get that rapid rise in temperature, for lack of a better term, you shock that tile. Because of the density of the tile, it doesn't expand at an equal, it takes a while to warm up. So what happens is you get that 2100 degrees on the inside, the outside is still at the temperature it was before. Anything when it gets hot wants to expand. So the inside of that tile is trying to grow very rapidly because of the rapid temperature rise. The outside's going, whoa, what's the deal? So and that's what actually breaks the flue tiles. It's not the actual temperature. It's a temperature differential.
It's moving faster on the inside than the outside?
Right, exactly.
Let's describe these flue tiles to our homeowners so everybody knows what they are. Why don't you take a break at that and just say it's a 12-12 flue. Why don't you walk through what that is?
Okay, a 12-12 flue, what it basically is a ceramic material. They make it out of clay of different types, but they fire them, which makes them very hard. Now, because that's a ceramic material, it's very dense, and they'll have a wall thickness typically of 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch, depending on what area of the country you're in. Some of the old tiles might be thicker than that. But because it's ceramic, it heats up slowly. So when you have that rapid temperature rise on the inside, the outside doesn't necessarily rise in temperature that fast.
Okay.
So it's a very dense and typically a hard material.
I think homeowners don't recognize that a flue tile was designed for smoke and not for fire.
It was. It actually was designed to convey the products of combustion, smoke, things like that to the outside atmosphere. And the other thing is, it's not something that a lot of folks think about, even in the professional side of this thing. But if that flue tile breaks in a chimney fire, but it protects the actual brick structure, it's done its job. Its job is to convey the products of combustion to the outside and protect the chimney structure. So even if it breaks in a flue tile or a flue fire, if it protects that structure and the dwelling, it's done its job. It's sacrificed itself, for lack of a better term.
I've never heard that said before. That's interesting. Well, there's two types of fire. Why don't you walk through what kind of burn area? We talked about this earlier, but why don't you tell our homeowners the different types of fire we're talking about here?
Yeah, and these are terms that we kind of made up, but there's basically two types of chimney fires. You'll get the free burning chimney fire, we call it. And what happens in that situation is, if you happen to be home, it sounds like there's a freight train running in your house because it's sucking all this air in there to fuel the fire. There might be flames shooting out of the chimney for some distance, 2, 3, 4 feet, and you'll get huge amounts of visible smoke. And that one, typically, you know what's going on. Even your neighbors know what's going on.
I can't tell you how many people have told me about something. They were woke up at the house by this, there's a fire, there's a fire.
Yeah, it's pretty graphic. The slow burning chimney fire, that's one that for whatever reason doesn't take off and really turn into a free burner. And it basically smolders, for lack of a better term. That one actually is a little more hazardous to the home than the free burner, because what happens is, because it lasts a lot longer, you get a lot more heat.
Okay.
And really the only sign is the wall's getting hot. Unless you happen to feel the wall, you're not going to know that's going on. And the other thing is, there's a lot of smoke coming out of the chimney.
Well, there also could be a lot of smoke coming out of the fireplace if that puffy creosote blocks it. Couldn't it roll back
Possibly.
also? Yeah.
Yep, that's a good point, Clay, because actually as that creosote pyrolyzes and burns, it'll puff up, and it can actually block off the flue and cause that smoke and heat to back up through the fireplace opening.
What are some other things that cause flue liners to crack or break? When we've gone through a chimney fire, I say it's a hostile fire or slow burning or free burning, whatever we want to call it. What are some other things that our homeowners should understand about what could cause damage to flue liners? When you think of it, it's like hard clay material. You think, what can really break it if it's just not fire? What the heck is it?
There's a lot of ways they'll break, but because they're really hard, they're fragile too. It doesn't take much of a blow to break one.
No.
So it's possible that flue was cracked, or even when it was put in. When they built the chimney, they may have put a cracked tile in there. That does happen.
Oh, they wouldn't do that, Russ.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, hey, it's 3:30 and it takes me half an hour to run down the masonry yard, and I only have 2 tiles left, and one of them's cracked. We'll put that one on the bottom because we'll have that brick before we go home tonight.
Yeah, we'll put some concrete around the outside of it. It won't hurt it. Don't go place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's one of the things that break them. If you happen to have a lightning strike on a chimney, that will blow the tiles apart sometimes. Earthquakes or even settling, if that chimney doesn't have a good footing under it and it moves, that can break the tiles. So there's lots of different things that can break the tiles. And even, you don't even have to have a chimney fire. If you happen to really put a rip-roaring fire that takes off quickly in a cold flue tile, sometimes that's enough heat to break them without ever having a flue fire.
Russ, I had a customer once tell me she was sitting in the living room with her husband, and all of a sudden the lightning hit, and it came down the chimney and blew her husband across the floor. The good news for him was that she was an emergency technician, and she gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation right there and saved his life. And I met both of them right there at their house.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was a crazy situation.
Yeah, chimney sometimes attracts the lightning because lightning tends to hit the highest place around. The chimney should be the highest point on the house.
You ever heard of the term electrolysis in the chimney, where there's positive, negative charges inside of it, then it actually attracts the lightning? Have you ever heard of that?
I have, but I've never seen it, or never seen proof of it. But I could certainly see how that happens.
I'm your host, Clay Lamb, and thanks for joining us here at Ask the Chimney Sweep. I want to take just a moment here and thank one of our vendors, Saver Systems. Saver Systems makes a really high-end water repellent. If you've got a water problem in your chimney, you think it's related to masonry or the mortar joints, it's a really good consideration to actually putting on top of the chimney. It's water-based, so it's going to go right into the brick masonry. It's non-glazing. In other words, it's not going to shine on like a lot of inexpensive water repellents. It's a professional-grade product, and I think you'd like using it. Another great product that Saver System makes is Crown Coat. If you've gotten up on top of the chimney or someone's told you that the top of the chimney there's hairline cracks around the flue tile, it kind of goes on like an icing. It can be brushed on. You actually put a tape around the bottom of the flue tile, right where it meets the crown, and you also put a piece of duct tape at the top of the brick. So you kind of sandwich that in there. So when you paint this on, you peel that tape off, you look like a professional. These products can be picked up at our web store, fireplaceandchimneysupply.com. Remember, we always offer free shipping. Thanks again for joining me here at Ask the Chimney Sweep. I'm your host, Clay Lamb, and let's get back into this conversation. Now, we're talking about a chimney that without any cap on it, how can that affect those liners down inside there?
Well, several things can happen. Because these are masonry, particularly if these tiles have had some damage, that hard coating, they're very prone to soaking up water. You don't have a cap on, water's coming down the flue.
Well, how do you know if you have freeze thaw in a chimney liner versus a crack from a fire? Yeah, with freeze thaw, typically it will show up as what we call spalling, where there's pieces have come off. Okay.
Rather than a crack. When that happens, the tiles typically will erode over time because as you get some spalling, you get bigger and bigger pieces of that hard-facing material breaking off, which exposes more to the rain. So it soaks up more water, and especially with the modern appliances we have, they don't necessarily run all the time. So that chimney has a chance to get pretty cold in between. In a lot of the country, you have freeze thaw every day. You know, for example, where I'm sitting right now, it's 50 degrees. It's supposed to be 15 degrees tonight. So we're going to have a big temperature swing, and any water that's soaked up in these chimneys, water expands when it freezes. So it's going to start working and breaking them apart. The other thing that will happen with no rain cap is, regardless of what fuel you burn, there's some kind of acid in those flue gases. And it'll vary by the type of fuel, but creosote's acidic by nature. So when that water comes down, it tends to activate that acid, and it will start eating those flue tiles up.
Now, what about the mortar joints? And we know that it's supposed to have been put in with a non-water soluble mortar.
It's actually been coded for 25 or 30 years now.
Of 100,000 homes, how many do you think have it?
10% maybe. It's that. Because even though that's the code, we know the things built before that probably didn't have it.
Yeah.
And even the things built after that may not. There are a lot of chimneys built where they use the same mortar to put the flue tiles together that they use to build the chimney. That's not suitable for that use.
Well, I had it on my mortar block, so I'm ready to pour this. Why do I need that other stuff? They don't realize the importance of what it is.
That's exactly what happens. The water will actually wash those out. And people tend to think that masonry is a permanent structure, that it's never going anywhere. And that's not the case. Water is probably the biggest enemy there is of masonry structures out there.
So let's talk about oil and let's talk about gas. Since we're talking about flue tiles primarily, we've gone through pretty much understanding of having a fire. But I want to go back and talk about fireplace flue sizing. But I want to talk about some of the things in oil and gas and what happens into the liners, because a lot of our listeners are living in other parts of the country where they're actually being exposed to oil and possibly more gas. So let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, what happens is when you burn gas, you produce a mild hydrochloric acid as the products of combustion. That's part of the whole combustion process is you get a mild hydrochloric acid. That's going to start working on the tiles and also working on the flue joints. With oil, you get sulfuric acid. That's one of the byproducts of burning oil is sulfur. And if you've ever been around an oil appliance, and the folks that have them in their home probably know what I'm talking about, you'll get a bad odor. And if you happen to breathe that in, it'll make your nostrils and your lungs and things burn. That's because of the sulfur that's in the smoke and the soot from an oil appliance. So that'll work on it. And what happens is a lot of the masonry chimneys out there, at the time they were built, were perfectly sized for the appliances that were venting into them. But now, as we've made our appliances more and more efficient, what's happened is those chimneys are way too big. So there's not enough heat going in that flue to really establish a good draft. So consequently, the products of combustion, the sulfur from burning oil, stays in the chimney instead of getting out of there. So it just starts working on it.
Now, is that true about oil as well as gas? I know gas is true, but is that true about oil? It's changed that much?
It has. It really has. My time in the industry,
Wow.
the flue sizes have basically halved. Gas furnaces, for example, the ones we did in the early days had 6, 7, and 8-inch flues on them. Now they're 4, 5s, and 6s. Yeah, so as we've made these appliances more efficient, what we've done is taken a lot of the heat that used to go up the chimney and outside and carry our products of combustion outside where it didn't hurt our chimney. We've taken that heat out now. So if the flue is oversized, it stays inside the chimney and starts eating it up.
How does that homeowner understand what's the proper way to size a flue liner for their fireplace?
It's really a ratio between the fireplace opening and your flue, and depends on your chimney. Is it straight? Is it offset? There's some factors there, but in general, to determine if you have the proper size liner, what you do is you measure your fireplace opening, determine how many square inches there is in the fireplace opening, and then you divide that by a number, 12 if you're using a round liner, 10 if you're using a square or rectangle, and that's how many square inches you need in the flue. For example, if you have a fireplace opening that's 30 by 40, and we'll use that one because the math's easy for me, that's 1,200 square inches. If I'm using a square or rectangle flue, I'm going to divide that by 10, and I need 120 square inches to vent that fireplace properly. Now, the reason it's got to be so many square inches in relation to, say, a wood stove, which runs off a 6-inch collar, is with a fireplace, we're pulling a lot of air out of the house. There's a lot of dilution air you have to vent along with the products of your fire. So that's why you have to have such a big liner for those.
We've got that flue size. Let's say we're going to put a round liner in there. Is there an advantage that you want to share with us about some of the round liner versus a square liner?
Round is always better because smoke tends to rise in a circular pattern. So you can get by with a little smaller liner. An example we just used, we said we needed 120 square inches if we're using a square rectangle. With round liners, we can divide that by 12, and this is in the National Fire Protection Association 211, the standard for chimneys and fireplaces. You can divide that by 12, so if you're using a round liner, you only need 100 square inches to vent that same fireplace.
So what do you do? Say the customer has a wood stove, a 6-inch wood stove, and they've got a 12 by 12 flue. Let's say he just wants it. And I would really frown on this, but let's say he wants to put that in a clay flue liner. I'm not sure why anybody would want to do that, but what size could he take it down to, about a 6?
You'd really, and this is in the FDA standard also, and most wood stove manufacturers now mandate that it be a certain size. And in general, you want to run the same size of liner through the chimney as the flue collar on the appliance. So if it's got a 6-inch collar, you want to run a 6-inch liner.
So everybody knows out there, it's really frowned on to look at a 6-inch opening on the back of a stove or the top of the stove or an appliance and dump it into a 12 by 12 or 8 by 12 or 8 by 13, whatever you want to call it. They're saying, let's put a 6-inch pipe down that chimney and connect it to the 6-inch opening on the top of the appliance.
Right. That gives you several advantages. It contains those products of combustion, because what happens is if you don't have that liner, when that smoke comes out of that wood stove, the first thing it does, and this is just It's physics. There's nothing you can do about it. When it's got that big space, like a 12 by 12 flute tile might have a 10 by 10 on the inside, for example. It's probably more closer to 11 by 11. 11 by 11 is 121 square inches.
Russ, I can just see some of our listeners that are going glazing over. Their eyes are just glazing.
In a nutshell, that smoke's going to expand and fill all that area, and it's going to cool. And because it's cooler, it's not going to go out the top of the chimney like it's supposed to. So consequently, you have a lot of creosote deposited in your flue, which makes the chimney fire we're talking about more likely.
Let's take a 12 by 12 flue. It's cracked all the way down through. We're going to drop another size liner, be it 10 or 11, depending on the square inches that opening the front of the fireplace. What are the requirements that should be around that new liner? What are you saying it needs to have?
Well, according to UL and most manufacturers' installation instructions, it does have to have some insulation around there. And there's various methods to do that. There are pre-insulated liners out there now. There are pour-in insulations that you can pour around the outside of the liner. And there are also ceramic wool wraps.
Are all of them acceptable as far as UL listing?
All of them are, as long as they pass the UL test. And most of the reputable manufacturers out there will talk to you about insulation, the need for it, because there's several reasons you might insulate the liner. One, it protects the liner because it keeps those products of combustion warmer, gets them out quicker. It also keeps heat from conducting out the surrounding combustibles. And that can be a problem, particularly in an older house where there's not proper clearances to combustibles.
Okay, now we've got that. We've got the liner in there. We've got insulation in there. How do you seal the bottom of a fireplace liner?
There are several methods to do that. Probably the most common guys do, where they'll make a plug of the ceramic wool we were talking about that you might insulate a liner with. They'll seal around it, and in a lot of cases, fireplaces were not properly constructed in that the inside of that smoke chamber, and that's the part that if you looked at it and you did a cutaway of a fireplace, it's right above the firebox, right above that throat damper where you got to open to make the thing operate. It basically looks like an upside-down funnel, and it funnels the smoke up into your chimney liner. That's supposed to be parged smooth, and that's in the codes and standards. But
when you're saying parged smooth, you're talking about the smoke chamber, correct?
The smoke chamber, and more importantly, not only is it code, it really improves the performance of your fireplace a lot because you really expedite the smoke getting up and out of that chimney.
So let's go to the top of the liner, very top of the chimney. So let's see, how is that finished off up there?
Well, there's always a plate of some sort up there to support the liner, and that's what holds the weight of your whole installation.
Okay. So that's actually support. Then you got a collar around that thing?
There may be a collar. There may be some kind of clamp system. There are some liners out there that will actually use L brackets that are bolted to the liner, and those sit on top of your plate or your chimney crown. So there's various ways they support them, but basically the weight is, for the most part, held up top somehow. And then there's some form of chimney cap over it to keep the rain out.
Well, Russ, you filled our cup full of good food here today, buddy. You filled it up for us. You gave us a lot of knowledge. You're always filled with this stuff. You've been doing it for a number of years. You've been in the trenches, which means that you can speak from experience and the technology side. Russ, thanks for stopping by here at Ask the Chimney Sweep.
You're welcome, Clay.
And homeowners, if you have any questions, you can get us on our YouTube channel. You can find us on our podcast here. You can also find us on our blog site. We get a lot of questions asked, and I reference a lot of things of our guests. Thanks again for stopping by here at Ask the Chimney Sweep.